Guardians of the haunted forest. The Carter family moved to the edge of the forest seeking a simpler life. Ben and Anna, weary of the city's ceaseless noise, craved tranquility for their 7-year-old son, Ethan. They bought a small, off-grid cabin nestled deep in the woods, far from the clutches of technology and urban chaos. The cabin, old but sturdy, stood near a grove of towering pines that swayed ominously, even when the air was still. From the moment they arrived, Ethan felt uneasy. The forest loomed with an unnatural stillness, broken only by the occasional rustle of unseen creatures. But Ben dismissed his son's concerns as childish nerves. "You'll love it here, bud," he said with forced cheer. "This is home now." The first few days passed quietly, save for Ethan's recurring nightmares. He dreamed of shadows moving between the trees, whispering his name in low, guttural tones. In the mornings, he woke pale and trembling, his small hands gripping the blankets. "It's just a new place," Anna reassured him. But she too had begun to notice strange things. The way the birds fell silent at dusk, the faint sound of snapping twigs outside their windows at night, and the sensation of being watched whenever she ventured too close to the forest's edge. One evening, Ben decided to chop firewood before the sun dipped below the horizon. Ethan sat on the porch, watching his father swing the axe. The rhythmic crack of splitting wood echoed through the clearing. Then, without warning, Ethan stood and pointed toward the tree line. "Daddy, there's someone there," he said, his voice trembling. Ben followed his son's gaze but saw nothing. "There's no one there, Ethan." "Yes, there is," Ethan insisted. "He's watching us." Anna stepped outside, her arms crossed. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Ben muttered, though his unease was growing. "Ethan's just imagining things." But Ethan wasn't imagining it. That night, as the family settled into their beds, a faint tapping sound echoed from the walls. At first, they thought it was an animal, but the tapping grew louder, more deliberate, as though someone were trying to get inside. Ben grabbed a flashlight and stormed outside. "Who's out here?" he shouted into the dark. The forest swallowed his voice. The trees stood still, their shadows stretching like skeletal fingers across the ground. He found no footprints, no sign of trespassers. But the uneasy feeling of being watched lingered long after he returned to the cabin. The next day, Anna ventured into the small town several miles away to gather supplies. At the general store, she struck up a conversation with the owner, an elderly man named Frank. When she mentioned their cabin's location, his face darkened. "You're near Hollow Pine," he said gravely. "Is there something wrong with it?" Anna asked. Frank hesitated, then leaned in closer. "That forest isn't right. Folks around here say it's haunted by the spirit of a hunter who died there years ago. He wasn't no ordinary man, though. They say he was obsessed with the woods, spent his whole life hunting until one day he had a fatal accident. But his spirit didn't rest. Some say he's not a ghost, not an animal, but something in between. And he doesn't like strangers in his forest." Anna laughed nervously. "That's just a story, right?" Frank shrugged. "Believe what you want, but if I were you, I'd be careful. The forest doesn't let everyone leave." Back at the cabin, Ethan began drawing unsettling pictures. His crayons sketched dark trees with glowing red eyes peering through the branches. "Who is this?" Anna asked, holding up one of the drawings. Ethan looked up, his face pale. "He's the hunter. He told me to stay out of the forest." Anna's heart raced. "When did he tell you that?" "Last night," Ethan whispered. "He was at my window." Ben tried to dismiss it as a nightmare, but Anna couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. That night, she and Ben stayed awake, listening. Around midnight, the tapping started again, louder and more insistent. Then came the sound of heavy footsteps circling the cabin. Ben grabbed his rifle and opened the door. "Whoever you are, get the hell out of here!" he shouted. But no one answered. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Ben fired a warning shot into the air, but the growl only grew louder, more menacing. The next morning, they found strange markings carved into the trees around the cabin. Symbols, crude but deliberate, circled their home like a warning. Ethan's drawings became darker, depicting a shadowy figure with antlers standing over their cabin. "We need to leave," Anna urged. "This isn't safe." But Ben, stubborn and skeptical, refused. "We're not running from a bunch of spooky campfire stories," he said. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the whispers began. Faint at first, like the rustling of leaves, but soon they grew louder, forming words. "Get out! Leave now!" The family huddled inside, the windows boarded and the doors locked. But the whispers seeped through the walls, accompanied by the sound of something heavy dragging across the ground outside. When Ben peered through a crack in the boards, he saw him, a tall, shadowy figure with glowing red eyes and the unmistakable outline of antlers. "It's just someone messing with us," Ben muttered, though his voice wavered. He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside, despite Anna's desperate pleas for him to stay. The forest was silent as Ben ventured into the trees, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the dark. "Show yourself," he shouted. His voice echoed, but no answer came. Then he saw it. The hunter, standing motionless between the trees. His face was obscured, but his antlers glistened in the moonlight. Ben raised his rifle, but before he could fire, the hunter moved, fast, impossibly fast. The flashlight fell from Ben's hands, plunging him into darkness. Anna and Ethan heard the gunshot, then silence. Moments later, the cabin door slammed open, and Ben staggered inside, pale and trembling. "We're leaving, now!" They packed in frantic silence, grabbing only what they could carry. As they fled the cabin, the forest seemed to close in around them. The whispers followed, growing louder with every step. Shadows moved between the trees, and the sound of heavy footsteps echoed behind them. When they finally reached their car, Ben slammed the door shut and started the engine. The headlights illuminated the road ahead, but just as they pulled away, Ethan looked back. Standing at the edge of the forest was the hunter, his red eyes glowing in the dark. The Carters never returned to the cabin. They sold the property and moved back to the city, but the memories lingered. Ethan refused to speak of the hunter, but at night he still drew pictures. Dark forests, glowing eyes, and the antlers that haunted his dreams. And sometimes, when the wind howled through the city streets, Anna swore she could hear whispers. "Get out! Leave now!"